our primary design right now is very iOS based. But there are certain things that are very different on platforms. And again, I just want to circle those hardware back buttons. That's the thing that drives me the craziest when I'm on an Android device and I have like 15 ways to go backwards. I mean, and then you have a home button that's different from, right? It gets a little insane. And so creating a uniform UI in our mobile web apps, our hybrid apps, is really important. And so having directives that just take care of that for you is pretty critical, because then you can just push it under the scenes, have it show when it needs to, have it not appear when it doesn't need to, and it's part of your markup. We have it wrapped up in this nice little bit of Angular goodness that we can just use. So Ionic ships with a few directives to help you do this. Specifically, we're looking at the hardware back button and seeing do you have a hardware back button? If so, go ahead and show this in the list view, or don't show it in the list view. If not, go ahead and do that. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty useful in not having a whole bunch of code all over the place, just trying to figure out whether or not you need to use the back button. And then native access. So native access is really, really, really important if you want to make an app on the App Store. I mean, these devices have sensors, they have cameras, they have local storage, they have all sorts of stuff. They have tons of peripherals that you can access through that Lightning Bolt port. If you want to control a Sphero, right, you have to go through the Bluetooth port. All this stuff you can do with these devices that is so great and so awesome. That would really suck if you could not access it through your app that you're trying to build with HTML. And so Cordova, the platform backing this, has the notion of plugin support that allows you basically to say, okay, I have this piece of native code, and I have this piece of native code for all my platforms. So I have one in Objective-C, one in Java, one in with the .NET bindings, and I'm going to expose to my web view, my hybrid app, JavaScript. And so the idea is that I'm able to control all this stuff just through JavaScript and make it, one, feel nice to use and workable, but also on all platforms, but also allows us to put it into an async format that we know and we understand and we use as JavaScript developers. So that would include wrapping up the camera as a promise. And so we can move on with the rest of our app development, know that we have a camera promise, and we can just use that rather than, again, having to write all this guard code around trying to figure out, okay, is the camera open? Can I do this thing? Can I send out this notification? Well, no, not really, but I can. So those sort of plugins help a lot. And so what I want to talk about a little bit about today with regards to that is Ionic, we are releasing what's called NGCordova. And I'm going to go to the website for that real quick, and we'll talk about it. NGCordova is basically Angular bindings for all of the AngularJS or the Cordova plugins that are available. So we've released it this week. We're getting it out there. We're starting to add plugins for camera, for status bar, for keyboard, for everything that you just want to use, but don't want to wrap up in your own directives. So this is as easy as including the JavaScript, throwing it out there, and now through your Angular app, you don't even have to use Ionic, but just through your Angular app, you now have direct access through directives to all of these things that you would have had to do by hand before. So check it out. It's open source, available. If there's not a plugin you're looking for or need, open an issue on it. We've released 6 betas of Ionic in the past 7-8 weeks, so we move fast on this stuff. And so if you don't have a plugin you see, or if you need a plugin that you don't see now, it'll probably be there very, very soon. So that's NGCordova, and we're super excited to get that out there and running because that was one of our major, major gaps still in getting this unified platform dream up there, out, and immediately accessible. So with that, I'd like to talk about what Ionic actually is. So Ionic is a hybrid HTML mobile framework, both UI and app framework, for mobile devices. You may have gathered that already, but it's worth saying that all again. And what that means is that, like never before, we can take and build really beautiful, easy-to-use mobile applications with very, very basic components and directives that we've built. There's a CSS framework component to it, so if you're not keen on using all of the AngularJS parts, you still can use it and still get great looking mobile apps out of it. So again, the entire thing is based on very, very modern technologies we know and love. And we built this specifically for modern mobile platforms. So we can take advantage of really, really nice features that you may not otherwise have gotten. We actually get questions all the time about Android 2.0 support and the things we would have to do in order to get that. I mean, we might as well just destroy the project. So right now we officially support iOS 6 and up, Android 4.x devices, and right now we have beta support for Windows Phone 8 and Firefox OS. So we have more coming down the pipeline. We want to support everything that Cordova supports. Maybe not in the fullest capacity. We probably won't take BlackBerry and make it a top-level platform within Ionic's roadmap, but we at least want the JavaScript to work. We want you to be able to use it, and we do have one brave adventurer on our forums who right now is making a BlackBerry app with Ionic and having a good time with it somewhat. So I have a bit.ly up here, and this will lead you to a plunker. Who's used plunker before? If you haven't, it's awesome. Plunker is a great way to live see your code as you're typing in a browser, and it's a great way to get help. It's like Pastebin on steroids. I'm going to go to it right now, and we're going to look at, this is something I'm actually working on, a tutorial I'm working on right now. And the reason I wanted you to pull up the plunker is just to get you used to using it. I could pull this up locally, but it'd be less interesting if you couldn't actually play with the code. I'm a kinesthetic learner, and so going in and being able to change something about my views is pretty important to me. So let me just come in here and change positive to energized. I'm trying to remember my color names. There we go. So being able to come in here real quickly and mess with it, play with it is really important. So with the exception of the resolution, you're looking at right now an Ionic app that was really quickly built. It's using UI Router. Who's used UI Router in the room? Who has any idea what I'm talking about? Okay, so Angular UI Router is a really nice routing library for Angular UI that basically gives you really great state management within your Angular applications. So we actually wrap that with Ionic and allow you to, we have tab management. For those who have messed with the app a little bit more, you may have noticed you can pull out a sidebar, and that's pretty nice. Let me make this, there we go. So you can actually pull out a sidebar, and that's a pretty nice feature you may not have noticed initially. But we also maintain state across views. How annoying would it be if I came over here to this tab, this task here? So I'm in a nested view, swap tabs over, and swap back, and I'm back at like my highest level. That would really, really, really be an annoying thing. And so we extend the routing system, one of the more popular routing systems, in order to maintain parallel histories throughout your application, so that you maintain that throughout the app as you traverse, come back, and everything you're doing is still there. So otherwise, I mean, this is pretty standard Angular stuff. We have some directives to make things nicer. We have the notion of tabs, side views, navigation views, header bars, footer bars, everything you might want to use in an Angular app. So we're gonna break down and create a more basic app, so you're not just staring at this giant pile of code and going, why do I care? But this is a better example of in 15 minutes the level of sophistication you can put together in a quick Ionic prototype. So for those learning beyond this and are interested on continuing learning Ionic, we have what's called Ionic Learn. We worked a few weeks over the spring in order to launch this, and right now we're putting up a new video and a new formula roughly around twice a week, 3 times a week, for all sorts of topics, getting started, working with the framework, using it. And so this is a great area to go to if there's a specific thing you're wanting to learn, or if there's a concept you also want to learn. So the difference of when do I use navigation versus a regular header bar, all the way down to how do I build out a complete tab system. in my application. So I'm going to show real quickly creating a basic Ionic app. So we use NPM and we use Gulp as well. We swapped over to that back in March, and we just love it. It's pretty great for our tool. So to get started, this works cross-platform. All you need to do is say npm install. And can everyone in the back see that? Okay, great. npm install IonicCordova-G. So you want to install these globally because they are binaries that you want to run. And we're going to grab those. If you're on iOS, I'm going to do my simulator demos in iOS today. I'll have you install a third module, so that's still going. So we're going to install a third module. Now, if you're using Android, Windows Phone 8, there's tutorials both on the Ionic site and on the Cordova documentation on how to get that running. And so go check that out. But just for today, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go through the iOS sim. And the reason for that is because we just have a nice iOS sim module that I can just install and get running with. So we're going to let that install. Glad we have internet, else you wouldn't be able to see that. But now we have all the building blocks necessary in order to start making an Ionic app. So Ionic ships with a nice command line tool that gives you a whole bunch of stuff that you can just use to help you create Ionic apps. So we have a couple of things. We have serve. Serve will start a local development environment up for you. When you create a Cordova app, you'll notice the structure is very, very different. And it's very designed around building an app, not letting you really quickly just host a static site and get playing along. So Ionic serve gives you a one-line command so you don't have to set up that Gulp script yourself with a live reload task. Who's used live reload? Okay, if you haven't used it before, I'm going to change your life in this presentation, and it's going to be awesome. So we have start. That will actually run it up on your device. We have emulate. Emulate will open the emulator and get you going and run the actual app. Actually, Ionic start will create a new app. Ionic run will run it up on a device. Ionic build will just build it for a platform. And then platform is all of your platform-specific tools. This is where you're going to do things like add plugins. This is where you're going to add a platform. So we'll see an example of that in a minute. And login and upload are beta commands right now for features that we're going to be launching over time. For example, letting you live preview an Ionic app on your devices, live update, code, stuff like that. So those are beta features or really alpha features that don't worry about those for now. But I'm going to create a new Angular app. I just need to be in a new directory, okay? So I'm going to say Ionic start, FITC app, and Ionic ships with a couple different, I guess, templates, you could call them. So we have a tabs template, we have a side menu template, and we just have a blank starter kit. So to get us started, I'm just going to create a tab starter app. And hitting enter, it's going to go get the latest version of Ionic and set up an app and install some plugins. One of the plugins we added recently in beta 1.0 beta 5, I believe, is a keyboard plugin. One of the things that really sucks about most native or hybrid mobile apps you see is the keyboard. So for those who are first time seeing this sort of stuff, what Cordova is doing is it's basically taking a web view in iOS and Android, a Windows Phone web view, and wrapping a native app around it. And so you're effectively, at the end of the day, just still displaying a web page. Well, the thing that really is annoying about that is when I tap into an input field, I'm still opening up a web-based form or a web-based keyboard that's expecting it, reading off your input and displaying it appropriately. And it's not displaying the native keyboard that you'd otherwise get if you were to design that input field through your iOS, your Xcode builder, your Xcode tools, or your Android version of that. So the keyboard plugin we've created for this basically will take all of your input fields and make them native keyboard views, so that you don't have the weird arrows at the top. It all just feels natural and feels closer to a native experience. So that gets installed for you when you just hit start. You don't have to go in and add that. That's a default thing. So now I'm just going to type Ionic platform add iOS. So this is just adding that platform for us. And, oh, you know what? I'm not in an app. There we go. You have to CD into the app first, just so you know that. It'd be good to get in there before starting to run commands on it. So now we're downloading that Cordova library for our iOS, and we've added it. So now I can just say Ionic emulate iOS. Pull up our simulator. It's a little large on this resolution, but I think we'll be okay. Window scale. There we go. Thank you. And bam, we have a running Ionic app that you can start playing with, you can start developing with. And we have tabs here. These tabs you can zoom in. And it's a really great way to see in a simple setting how an Ionic app is constructed. We'll look at the code for this in a second, but we've gone from 0 to rudimentary working app in 3 commands. And that's pretty cool, and that's pretty powerful to think that something before that would take installing Xcode and then figuring out your provisioning profiles. Provisioning profiles really suck. Doing that entire tool chain and then finding out, okay, I really just want to build a list of things and a title, and then you figure out what that all entails. We're looking at something that was no easy feat, especially early on in the iOS days. And so having this up in 3 commands is pretty nice. Let me show you Ionic serve real quick. So serve will start up that live reload server I was talking about. And so now we just have it up in a browser and we can work with it. We don't have to run this thing in the device. And the great thing is this is using live reload. So what live reload does is it injects basically a little bit of JavaScript into your app and runs a server on your computer, and they connect via WebSockets. And what those do is it notifies the browser of any changes, and if it's CSS, it just injects it directly. And if it's JavaScript, it auto-reloads your page. If it's markup changes, it auto-refreshes your page. So that gives us an unparalleled ability to tighten our feedback loop. We can have our tests running in the background on every change, and we can also see the results running on every change. So let me just demonstrate that. Let me pull this up in WebStorm, which is, I'm a Vim user, but this is the only thing lately that's been auto-completing my HTML right. So this will give us a chance to look through a little bit of the Ionic, the Cordova app hierarchy to understand a little bit more of what's going on. So can everyone see the browser up there? Okay, the file drawer? Great. So here in our basic, at the top level, we're using Bower. And Bower, if you haven't used it before, it's like NPM, but for client-side management. So Bower is going to contain things like _Lodash, jQuery if you want to add that in. So it's really powerful tool for just maintaining your front-end development dependencies. That can then be concatenated with Browserify or anything else you're using. So that's pretty awesome. We have our standard package.json. As I was saying before, we do use Gulp. The Ionic tool uses Gulp, and we also ship with Gulp in our generated projects so that you can do things like Sass concatenation really easily and stuff like that. For those of you who haven't used Sass, Ionic does use it. It's basically a CSS preprocessor that will gives you some nesting and variables and other things that may be helpful. If you want to use less or something else, you'll have to do that conversion yourself. Right now, we are a purely Sass-based tool. And you can actually see here, in our www folder is where our Angular app actually resides. So if we go to index.html, and let me make this a little bigger, we can see that with the exception of, there we go, with the exception of some weird Ion stuff that we'll talk about in a second, we have something that looks like an Angular app. We don't have something that has this specific weird DSL that is strange and crazy, and we have to learn a whole new language. We're still just using AngularJS. And it's important to remember that. that all this is directives and other things to help you as an Angular developer really quickly and really easily build mobile apps. So we, again, have this NG app. We're all used to seeing that. And we have our own animation directive. So what we do is we handle a lot of the animations that are cross-platform for you. And so these are all CSS3 powered animations, so they're performant, they work nice, and they look nice, and it just adds a touch of completeness and professionalism to your apps. So we have several animations that are all built in. If you want to build your own, it's as easy as going in and using Angular's NG Animate with some CSS3 animations. So here we get into some of the Ionic specific directives, like nav bars, like back buttons, and stuff like that. And these all relate to working with Ionic's history management. And this is going back to what I said with our ability to, if I go back here and emulate again, our ability to switch tabs and still maintain multiple sets of histories across our state. So if I can come in here, be inside of Scruff McGuff, tab or list view, switch back to dashboard and come back, and I'm still within that list view. Doing this yourself in Angular would really be terrible to work with, and so the extensions to the router handle that for you. We are looking at making some API changes because UI router wasn't designed to do this multiple state management, and so we do have some weird hacks that are in there in place as of today to deal with that. Soon you won't have to deal with that at all. You can follow those issues on GitHub. We are an open source project, so you can see the status of that if you're using Ionic. But for today, we are using UI router, and some of the things we do in there is mostly to deal with these multiple layers of history that are going on in any mobile app at any given time. So coming back here, and if we exit out of presenter mode, we can go into one of our templates. Oops. And we can see that this all, here, we'll go into friend detail, or we'll go into the tab friends. And we can really quickly see, again, this looks like just regular AngularJS code. We have an ng repeat there. We're hooking into a controller. The controller looks normal. We can go to that controller real quickly. But we have this thing called Ion View. And Ion View is there, again, to help our router with things like displaying the title of the header for the nav bar. So you don't have to have your header bar code coupled to your actual view. And that's really important because otherwise, every view would include its own header bar, its own tab bar markup, everything it needed to run the app. And by doing this, by making an Ion View, it gets it into Ionic's routing system and navigation system and informs it, okay, I should call this page friends. And we can see that back in the emulator. I should just leave this open. Back in the emulator on dashboard, friends up here, and account. And so all that logic is encapsulated just into the things that need to know about it and bubbles up properly without any sort of issues you might otherwise face. So that's a very basic Ionic app. It's super easy to modify, super easy to work with. How am I doing on time? 15, okay. So this is all also very testable. Protractor, for those of you who've used it, Karma works just out of the box. You run it in Phantom.js. They've also now started shipping Appium support, and Appium will work with this stuff, so you can actually test this stuff on Sauce Labs up in a mobile browser or mobile emulator and have it just work. That goes the same with Protractor. Google Seattle near me actually just brought on someone else to work on this, specifically to mobile. And so the Protractor's Appium support is vastly improved. And so you can actually also run your end-to-end testing of mobile apps through this stuff. And we're right now working on better support in Ionic to just have that happen out of the box, so you don't have to think about it. There's a little bit of setup that works right now. There are some repos I have on my GitHub, and I'll link to that that shows it. And so check that out. You can get started with that pretty easily. The last thing I'll show is this notion of having a lot of stuff in our view. So right here, I have a view with 3,000 contacts, and let me enter presentation mode here. 3,000 contacts. Now, on a mobile device, on any device, this is enough to sort of cripple the DOM and in Angular and make things really just nasty and suck, especially if we're doing a lot of updates to this stuff. So if I come in here and filter, I should grab something other than the first set of things to filter. That'd be helpful. Oh, we also have physics-based scrolling. I know that doesn't sound like anything cool or important, but it's actually really useful in obtaining that native experience. And we worked hard to make sure that it doesn't suck. So we don't screw up and make your native, like regular scrolling experience feel terrible. That was really important to us. We never want to make the experience worse. We always just want to make it better, more native feeling. And so that's the idea behind our native physics scrolling and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to grab, let's grab all the Seans in this list. And remember, we're looking at 3,000 contacts here. So, well, maybe it's going by last name? No. There we go. So we grabbed all the Julias in here. And notice that happened just as fast as a filter across 10 or 20 items or even 100 items. That instant. And it's instant on mobile too. And this is because of something we use called the collection repeat directive. This is available. There's videos on this. There's a formula on it, as well as documentation on it. And what collection repeat does is it will actually only render the cells necessary to present this view to you. So instead of rendering 3,000 things when we don't have a filter, right now we're rendering only 7 things. And just enough to scroll, to feel native, and to feel performant. And then we adjust the DOM as we go. Doing a lot of DOM adjustments over a few items turns out is much faster than trying to statically render 3,000 of them or 300,000 of them. We hit about 400,000 items before we managed to really break it down, and we were getting about 4 to 5 frames per second. So this is huge amounts of volume that you can get out of this collection repeat directive, provided out of the box. Now there's some caveats with it, like you have to know how big your cell is going to be. We're going to assume that because you've pre-designed it. And we're doing some magic with absolute positioning because it's not really a naturally scrolling list. We reposition things on the fly. And so there are some caveats, but if you can fit within those parameters, this is a great option for doing huge infinite lists that will automatically do things like infinite scroll, pull to refresh, all that sort of functionality. So this and many, many other really powerful things are all available and up on the Ionic site. So just to recap a few things, again, I'm Gerred Dillon, and we're developer evangelist for Ionic Framework. That means I want all of you to use Ionic Framework, so we make ourselves very available. I'm available on, let me pull this up. I'm available through the forums, through Learn Ionic, and through IRC, as well as GitHub. Our entire company runs as a GitHub issues-based company because we are an open source company. That's all we do is open source. And so quickest way to get to us is often opening an issue. And on IRC, we use it pretty actively. We have usually about 80 to 90 people in there at any given time. And then again, if you want to learn more about Ionic, check out Ionic Learn. And for all of the native stuff that we're talking about and we're right now really, really working on, check out NGCordova. So pretty cool stuff. It's all available out there. You can get started with it today. We have multiple getting started videos for just going beyond that first level of Ionic Start, My App, Ionic Emulate, and Ionic platform apps. So there's much more to learn. We have several apps on the App Store already made by people in the community that are pretty awesome. Check out the showcase. There's some awesome stuff going on with the tool. So with that, oh, and I'll show our GitHub real quick. We're under the organization Drifty Co. slash Ionic, and that's just because when we started working, we were under the name Drifty, working on Codica and other stuff, and so, but now we work on Ionic. And with that, I'll open the floor to any questions. Yes? Question was, basically as in the iOS demo, having the 3 bottom tabs, will Ionic automatically convert it to the Windows Phone format of having the 3 tabs glued to the top? That's something we're actively working on for the next beta right now. We actually had a great conversation about this the other day, and that's the intent. Right now, Windows Phone support's in beta, and so yes is the answer in the future. Any other questions? Yes. That's a great question. Question is, can you use grids in Ionic, or do you need an additional library? We do have grid support built in. We do have an entire CSS framework. Let me go to our documentation. And that includes, let me make this smaller. That includes a full, if I can get to it, I'm past it. Changing my size is messing me up, but we do have a full grid system, yes. It's in our CSS docs. There we go. Fantastic. So we have everything you'd expect from a grid system. You have evenly spaced columns, column sizes, you can do your offsets, vertical alignment. We use CSS Flexbox because we can on mobile. Everybody supports it now. And so we can do a lot more interesting things with our grid setup than you could if you were supporting browsers that don't have Flexbox. Yes? Great question. Question is about local storage support. There are a few directives out there that do it at the moment. Ionic doesn't have an opinion shipped with it about how to do that. There's a talk later in the day that I'm pretty excited for about using local storage or offline support. So be sure to check that out. As well as there will be an NGCordova extension that will open up several APIs for local storage that are native to devices outside of what's available in the web view. But outside of that, Ionic doesn't ship with anything explicit. Yes? Sorry, can you repeat the question? Oh, this demo? This is the collection repeat directive. So I can pull up the JavaScript. It's under lists, collection repeat. So that's the directive you'll want to check out if you want to build very, very, very large lists. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes, you can. That's in the docs. I can get with you after and talk about it. We're using Hammer.js under the hood. Oh, question was, is there a way to use Ionic without our built-in touch events and everything required with that? Answer is yes, you can. Our chosen backbone for that is Hammer.js, which is a iOS, Android touch library or JS-based touch library. But you can do it without it. Everything in this is very, very flexible, and there's nothing that says you have to use all of our opinions. It's very piecemeal. Yes. Question is, does our collection list use lazy loading? It can. In that example, no. But we have the Ion infinite scroll directive, which basically will detect when you're at a certain scroll point and execute a function for you. And so you can use that in order to get lazy loading. of different things. I also have a few plunkers that show different ways of doing that without using that example, but yes. All right, if there's no more questions, thank you very much, and hopefully that was enough to get you started using Ionic.